Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
But because of who I'm going to become in the process.
Yeah.
So I think that made a big impact. Obviously, I told you that story as a freshman in college, but problem solving wasn't that big of an issue anymore because I had been, and they train you, put your phone away during the day. You go out and work, and if something goes wrong, you figure it out, which I think is so powerful for young people to learn on an early age because, if you're trained that I just grew up with my parents, and when something goes wrong, I can just call dad and he can bail me out.
Right.
That's a great luxury. But when you are forced to think creatively and problem solve, it's incredible what you can do. And also just the attitude shift for someone. Like I've had some crazy things happen in my life I got evacuated by the UN when I was in Haiti because of mobs. And then I got mugged in South Africa. And there's these crazy things that have happened, and we might get into those stories, but I remember in Cape Town, South Africa, after getting mugged, I was stabbed in my hand. It was minor. And I'm sitting in the hospital, and I'm like, this is a great story. Well, I'm alive. I'd spent time that day in a hospital,
live to tell about it.
Sitting there thinking about all the other places that I could have gotten stabbed. My hand worked, right? And I was with a buddy, and his wife shows up, and her face is all red, and she's been crying. And I was like, what's wrong? Because in my mind, I'm like, I'm fine, I'm okay, right? I don't know. Again, it's hard to explain, and I'm kind of jumping a lot of things there, but I think that attitude of having to solve your own problems, choosing to focus on what you can control, not obsessing about what's out of your control.
Right.
Those are things that I thankfully learned very early on from a very challenging, difficult summer internship as a college kid.
Right.
Have totally impacted so many facets of my life since. So
Amazing how that works.
Yeah, that college season was very transformative, not only from coming to America. I loved school and I loved that college experience, but also my summers were really tough, but a really big deal for just developing character.
Life skills, yeah.
Yeah, life skills.
So what did you major in at Point Loma?
Yeah, that's a fun one. You'll like, because you talked about my dad already. My dad was he literally in the Philippines, so as a missionary, obviously, he was really well connected. He also people know my father, and because he's this giant 6'3" white man that speaks fluent, and he can preach in 5 different languages. So it's they know of this guy, and so he's really well connected. And so in school, he brought me and my brother to visit all these successful people that he knew, people that own different businesses all throughout Tacloba and politicians, things like that. And he actually sat us down in their office, and we would ask questions about what they did in college and how they got to where they were. Genius idea.
Absolutely.
As a kid, I was like, Dad, this is boring. Why are we doing this? And the funny thing that I learned, I don't know if this is what he would have wanted me to learn, but what I took away from this whole experience, Mike, was I was like, oh, nobody does what they studied.
Unintended consequences.
Yeah, nobody does what they actually studied in college. So I was like, I want to be a lawyer or a doctor. So I was like, I guess I'm going to study what I want to. What sounds fun? Literally, this was my thinking. Yeah. And in high school, I'd come across video editing. I'd come across Photoshop. Yeah. I found out about graphic design. So I'm like, yeah, graphic design, that's going to be fun. I get to play on the computer and design things. And my uncle, my dad's, one of his younger brothers, builds power plants in the Philippines, big science guy. He knew about my grades and how good I was at science. And I remember him like worried about my future.
Yeah.
Like, why is your son studying art?
Yeah.
Because he could be so successful in science and math.
It's a waste.
And I remember like, it's a waste. But that wasn't where my mind was at. And you'll laugh at this, Mike. I think first semester in college, I found out about this idea of a double major.
Ooh.
I didn't know this. And, you know, like missionary kid lifestyle, you know, growing up without much. I go, I could get 2 for the price of 1.
Right.
I was like, sign
It's
me
the
up.
bargain.
So then I'm already in college. I'm at Point Loma. I'm like looking at the list of what are all the other things I can study.
Yeah.
And there was media communications and filmmaking. I was like, I like movies.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Let's go.
So then I basically most of my college career I double majored.
Wow.
In graphic design and media production with an emphasis more the general production, so radio, TV, film. And I ended up graduating with a minor in graphic design because I had a few credits and it's like not worth it to pay for a semester at Point Loma. But it was like, sign me up for the maximum credit load. I was trying to like, where can I fit that 1 unit elective so I can get at the max? I never would you could get more units and pay extra. I was like, no, like get right to the max. I was like, getting my money's worth in college was like my attitude.
So good.
And so, I studied basically art and communications.
That's cool.
And so it was very unique going from being in high school where I was the type of test taker, Mike, where it's like, I would go through, finish the test, and then go back to all the questions I wasn't sure about, and then like kind of estimate what my score would be because I was just trying to get to 100. That was like my competition. I want to ace this thing every single time, which is a very like study for test, memorize facts, excel. And then I go into these art classes that art project or graphic design, you could spend 6 hours on this thing and be like, this is garbage. Let me start over.
Yeah.
So it was like a whole different mental, emotional muscle to work on projects. And sometimes I'd be in the library working on a project and just want to be done and like longingly look at the people in like biochem or in nursing that are just studying for a test. I'm like, that's so easy. I can just study for a test. Obviously it's not that easy, but you know, it was like it's an interesting change in pace and how I went about school and study. But that was a really fun season for me to be creative and create things and do film and video production.
That's cool. So were you in school for 4 years?
Yeah.
Okay. So you graduate, then what happens?
So I graduated and kind of the options, that summer internship I had, there was an option to go full-time.
Right.
And the attitude I had about that was like, I want to do this until I've kind of soaked everything I can out of it. And I didn't quite understand what doing that full-time looked like versus like being in school. But I had seen mentors and had seen where it's like, there's a skill set here that I don't quite know, and I want to stick around till I at least get that.
Sure.
So I did 2 more years of that, where I basically during the year, we launched a personal development student organization on San Diego State's campus called LEAD, which was like a coaching in where we would run weekly seminars. That was like on campus org, right? All about personal development. And then out of those students, we would recruit students that wanted kind of the hardcore, you know, like boot camp version would come and work with us in the summer.
Okay.
So kind of my job was recruiting, but we did recruiting through kind of this more open platform where I was actually doing one-on-one coaching with a bunch of college kids all throughout the year. So I would do one-on-one coaching sessions. We had like a whole booklet that brought them through setting goals. One of the big questions was what could you do? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Or the exercise of like imagining your own funeral and thinking about what would you want people to say about you.
Right.
So I would get college kids, like I remember this one young girl who was like, I want to be known for my recipes. She's like, my abuela has like all these recipes and we make these at home, and I want to be the mom and the grandma that has those family recipes. And I was like, you know, so it was like really cool asking questions, like you said, and leading all these young people on how to time manage, set goals. So I did that 2 years, and that was kind of like a huge growth season for me. And also, what am I trying to say? It was challenging too, Mike, because like I had this passion for film. I remember watching like a documentary on Spielberg and being like, I'm his age now, like when he made Jaws, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? And like debating, do I just drop everything, go to LA, eat ramen noodles for years and try to make it, right? But it was like, I was always torn, and I think I just consistently chose, looking at my life now, what's the best opportunity? And in my mind, if I wanted to make films someday, learning the sales skills, making money, if you're gonna make a film, you gotta sell that film, you gotta get people to watch that film. So it's like, in my mind, it's still on the path. It wasn't derailing or turning away. It was like, these are all skills I'm learning now, and the best opportunity I have access to at the moment that are gonna help me potentially get that one way, or that eventual dream. And one of the ways I look at life too, Mike, is like, I could have fought my way to get what I wanted and become a filmmaker then. Or at 40, right, I might have built a career, developed myself, raised my family, and then all of a sudden have an opportunity where I'm doing something at a much higher level versus having to work my way through the ranks, right? Because a lot of times through relationships, things like that. So I still have an interest in that. That might come about someday. I use those skill sets in my professional job now, but yeah, that's what I did immediately afterwards.
Okay. So then you leave Southwest. What makes you leave Southwest?
I was just at a place in my career where at that age, it's either you had a large enough organization that it made sense to continue, but although I had some success, things didn't pan out numbers wise, where it's like, this just wasn't that attractive. I swung at bat a few times to try to get to a big enough organization and didn't quite get there. So then I actually worked for 6 months with my brother selling insurance. And then I quit it all and went to a Bible school for a year here in San Diego. The Rock Church had a discipleship school called Impact 195, which was basically a year, 20 hours a week. You basically study what the Bible really means and what that means for your life. And through that, I got to go on some of those trips I mentioned, South Africa and Haiti. And then I felt that longing and that calling to go work with my parents, because I was like, I grew up there, and it's kind of like, I know your family, you come from living on a farm, and you actually farmed with them.
For 9 years.
But I think a lot of people that have childhoods, their dad's an accountant, what do they really know about accounting? Similar to me, I grew up in the Philippines as a missionary kid, but I didn't really do anything with my parents. So there was this kind of calling of like, hey, I want to actually go and experience that, and be a part of what my parents have dedicated their lives to. Like, I want to help with that.
How cool.
So then I went, after that year, I went straight out to the Philippines and worked as a teacher and basically the pastor of the campus. So we'd have like weekly chapel services. So I basically taught, everyone in the school, kinder through 12th grade, at some capacity. That season was pretty cool.
That's awesome. So you go there, you spend how long?
About a year.
Okay.
Yeah. So just a school year. It was funny because it got upgraded. I was like, I'm just gonna go for the summer and hang out and help. And then my dad was like, if you really want to make a difference, you should work at the school, right? And at least stay 6 months. You're not gonna make any sort of impact in 2 months. And so I prepared to go out for 6 months, and then the few weeks before, I was like, you know what, if I'm working at a school and I'm there for 6 months and then I leave, that's almost worse. You leave an empty gap.
Right in the middle,
So anyways, last minute, I decided to stay for a year.
Wow.
And And then coming back was kind of like this big existential quarter-life crisis of like, what do I do now?
What made you come back?
Well, there were a couple things, Mike. Essentially, going out, there's a lot of complications people don't think about in terms of visas. You know, I actually had to, I wasn't getting paid through the school. I had to raise money to go out. So I had raised enough money for a year. If I were to stay, I would have had to come back and raise more money.
Wow.
And support to go back out. So like the only way, there's lots of ways to get visas, but like basically the way that I was doing it was all of my money had to come from America.
Gotcha.
Right? And I couldn't be paid by the Philippines. And so I had to do that. So it was kind of this thing, partially was like this time was up. If I wanted to stay, it would have been a lot more work to stay. And also like, if I'm being honest, and I've reflected on this a lot, looking at my immaturity at that time, and it was like I was doing some really phenomenal things in the lives of these kids. And it was a huge confidence builder in my life, because I remember having other faculty, staff, my parents say like, whatever you do something like this because you're really good at it. And I remember sitting in my office one time and being like, you know what? This is only like a couple hundred kids. Like, I want to make movies and impact the world. And, you know, I think young people sometimes, they have this delusion of grandeur. And it's like, that wasn't big enough for me at the time, Mike.
Yeah, I think we all do.
And I was like, you know what? This is just some small school in the Philippines. And, you know, I'm looking at social media, seeing people that have fame. And, you know, there was that desire, you know. And
it's an itch.
It's an itch.
Yeah.
And so that was part of it. Part of it was like I was single. It was a very lonely experience. There was parts of it where I would see amazing things happen. You know, one of the cool things about serving God is like, I know what my personal capacity is and what my skill set is. And I show up, and I might have even like crammed to prepare for this thing. And then what actually happens the day of is much greater than that.
Wow.
And I'm like, what's in the gap? And it's just, I was an instrument being used by the Lord, and he wanted to do his thing, and he was just inviting me along for the ride. And so many times I'd pause, Mike, and be like, did anyone else see that? And it's like, for me, I just, like, I could see it. Like, people in participation might have just thought that was me.
Right.
You know, and I was just good at that.
You were playing that all along.
In my mind, I'm like, and I wanted, you know, I there was this longing of like, no one quite gets what I'm going through. And part of coming back too was like, you know, I'd love to meet someone that I can share my life with. And I didn't see that happening quickly or anytime soon, being there.
Yeah. So you almost had to come back here to meet whoever you were going to meet.
Yeah. Which I'm still in the process of.
Wow. So how long has it been?
Oh, that was, what would that have been? It's been 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Been 6 years since. So I've been working. When I came back, it was funny, Mike. I had it set in my mind, I'm going to get a salary position doing video production. I want to get into the industry. I'm sick of this sales stuff.
Right.
You know, going out in the mission field, I had to raise support. It's kind of like, you know, doing the same commission. You fight for what you eat, right? I was like, I want someone to pay me money. I just want to know what I'm going to make. And then when I got back here, I was wrestling with all these options. And one thing I'd learned over there was just how much I enjoyed teaching and speaking and how much I felt gifted in that. So I was like, well, what is the one thing I have mastery of? Like, well, I've spent pretty much a decade doing sales.
Right.
So my professional life is sales. So then I reached back out to that company, Southwestern, and they had a kind of a headhunting sister company. And I was like, hey, can you find me a job that's like training and coaching in sales? Because this is what I've learned. And so the company I work with now, Southwestern Consulting, same name as you can tell, is their training and coaching division. I didn't even know it existed at the time. So what I've done ever since is basically one-on-one coaching with entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, salespeople, basically helping them reach their goals.
Gotcha.
And then I run a lot of workshops. So most companies that have teams, kind of the way that I network, the same way for you as a realtor, you might do a buyer's workshop. That's just like valuable information. And you do a bunch of those, and out of those, people decide to buy a home through you.
Right.
So for us, we do these workshops where we'll partner with like a team leader or a broker or, you know, in the real estate world, or any business that has a team. And we'll come out and do a free workshop, kind of customize it with the leader. And then from there, that's kind of how we engage people in coaching, because their life's not going to change in an hour.
Yeah.
And a lot of people realize, man, I have some goals that I really want to hit. It'd be helpful to have someone to support me with that. So I have a team. I'm on a team of about 150 coaches.
Wow.
So every time I run a workshop, so like next week I'll be in Seattle working with a couple RV dealerships.
Wow.
If any of those people there enroll in our coaching program, it's not that I'm their coach. We'll use a personality assessment, match them with a coach, and then vice versa. A lot of my clients end up getting matched with me based on personality and other, you know, we have a team that actually does that. So part of my time, maybe 40%, is like one-on-one, like you said, Socratic coaching, asking questions, helping people decide on their vision, their goals, helping them put action steps. And then the other piece is networking with leaders to actually run trainings and do workshops to kind of add value to groups.
Right. So what's your favorite thing about working for Southwestern Consulting?
My favorite thing, I think there are times, my brother asked me this question recently, Mike. I could say a lot of things. We have trouble with favorites, but I'll give you this answer. There are times that I'm on a coaching call and someone will come on and they're emotional and they're a hot mess. And part of me in that moment is like, whew, what are we gonna do here? Right? We're 5-10 minutes into the call.
Right.
And through that process, asking questions, and sometimes, you know, like you'll get emotional. I'll tear up, they'll tear up. I'll say things directly at them and challenge them. And there's this side of me that comes out in a moment where I'm fighting for this person. And then at the end of the call, this person's like, man, that was like the best call we've had. You know, or I'll see that we resolved that. And then I'll get off the call and be like, wow, I was designed for this. You know, like I'm good at this. Like there's something that connects with, I think everyone's got different gifts and different personalities, and a piece of, I enjoy listening to people. I enjoy, I have a more agreeable, compassionate, loving native style. Like even when I had a season where I drove Uber, like I enjoyed the hot mess 2 a.m. pickups. Wow. And other people are like, how could you deal with those, you know, those drunks in your car? I was like, they were funny, man. You know, it's like, I just have that piece, and a lot of how I was raised gives me a level of compassion. I think that's unique. So for me, when I have those calls, I go, wow, like I'm doing something that I'm uniquely gifted at, and that person really needed me today. And that's what I'd say is one of my favorite things about what I get to do, is there's nothing like a one-on-one human connection where someone realizes that you're the most important person to them in that moment. That creates some really cool experiences.
So, you mind if I say something?
Sure.
So, they're giving you permission.
Yeah.
That is a really cool thing that you've earned.
Yeah.
Like literally. Okay. You have to show up. You have to bring it. You have to be legitimately, honestly, completely interested in what's going on with them to earn that. Okay, it's like you were talking about earlier. You were saying, you know, you'll ask somebody a question and they'll literally stay on the surface.
Yep.
Right? It's one of the things that frustrates me. I teach in the real estate industry, and one of the things that frustrates me the most is realtors will stay here.
Yeah.
In fact, all salespeople will stay here, because if you dig, there's pain down here.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's where those tears come from, and that emotion and all that kind of stuff. You're getting there is a big, 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 big deal. Because very few people, and I mean, I'm talking single digit percentage of the people in this world will actually go there. That's a big deal.
And pain is where no one's going to change unless there's...
You're never going to transform. You're never going to transform. You're never going to heal. You're never going to get done what you need to get done until you address what that pain is and then figure out a way through it.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of my favorite growth, like, I joke that it's hard not to live an exceptional life as a coach because, like, people look to me as the source of inspiration and example for their life. So I've got to bring it and live it in my life. But I think one of the areas that I've grown the most in the last 5-6 years doing this as a coach is that my natural personality style is much more conflict avoidant, indirect, very good for building long-lasting relationships. But as a coach, part of my job is bringing the pain and asking the tough questions and challenging and confronting and creating that friction.
You do see how your dad prepared you for all this, right?
I did, yeah.
I mean, that is brilliant, man. That is brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank him the next time you talk to him.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you do anyway, but
I'll thank him at dinner tonight.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to see him. That's awesome.
Yeah. They're in town for a couple months. So.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, that's been an area that I've had to grow in because just the way that my natural state, I don't want to say something, Mike, that's going to offend you or hurt your feelings. I want to be friends with everybody. I don't want anyone to be mad at me. And as a coach, part of my job description is I've got to piss you off enough to make you change. And I've learned, and it's fun because it's a lot of my longest, my very first client I was ever assigned, I'm still coaching.
Yeah.
And he's on the other end of the spectrum where he's higher on the opposite end of the personality, right?
Right.
More direct. And I've learned a lot of times those clients enjoy working with me because they're almost like they have conversations with their team members and it really turns the people off and turns people away, and they're like, Peter, how would you say this?
Right.
And I'm able to add the softness and the that piece of it. So for me, I've learned, and I think this is not unique to me, I think in most people, there is a side of yourself that's hard to step into. Like for me, it's that direct confrontation. When I do, I can't live there, but when I do, it's extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And I do what I can in my life to build that muscle and practice it and gain the level of self-awareness where I can flip it on when necessary. Because it's one thing to have a father who is angry all the time and that's just who they are, that you expect that. When my friends see me get angry, they're like, oh, right? Like that's unique and strange, right? And different. So for me, it's like and it's not that directness is anger, right? But I'm just saying when I speak powerfully and with that loud and slow vocal variety of strength, that's like what I'm always learning to use when necessary. Not manipulate it, not take advantage of it. But for me, that's the hardest thing, the scariest place to step out to. And that's where I've seen myself be most powerful for other people.
Yeah. So doing that is a stretch for you.
Absolutely.
Right? But it's also an opportunity.
Yeah. And it's where I get to grow the most and where people around me get to grow the most. And I think no matter who you are and what you do, there is something like that equivalent in your life that it's really uncomfortable and it's a stretch. But when you press into that, lean into that, you will grow the most, more than you ever have. And the people around you will be impacted the most. And I think that's part of life, right? Where we get to step into those places and push ourselves. I think it would be a really sad existence if I just stayed in my comfort zone.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this is the way you were raised.
Yeah.
You were raised to love people.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But you were also raised to make a difference.
Yeah.
And the only way you're really going to make a difference is if you bring a little bit of heat.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's uncomfortable, but it's absolutely necessary. And to me, it comes down to standards. Okay. So I can be sitting with somebody and having a conversation with them, and I'll just ask them point blank. So let me ask you a question. Is this your standard? Is this really what you're currently doing? Is this really your standard? When you think about what your standard is in your life, are you living up to it right now?
Or you might use the word potential with that.
Well, I don't go to potential. What I go to is standards, because here's the thing. Potential is a way overused term. Okay.
Agreed. As a coach,
and it's ethereal. It's ethereal, right? Because what you're capable of, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But when you sit and have a conversation with somebody about their standards, that's where things get personal. That's where things, all of a sudden, they have to examine this. You with me? And so I'll ask them. So I know you pretty well by now, and I know that your standard is pretty high.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Is what you're currently doing and the current outcome that you're getting, is that to your standard? And what it does is it makes them go back and go, oh, no. Okay, well let me ask you this. How can we get to your standard? See, my standard doesn't matter. It doesn't, right? I'm not gonna tell this person, I'm not gonna tell this person what they have to do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask this person, we're here. Your standard is here.
Yeah.
How are we gonna get here? Right? And as a coach, I'm gonna ask them, what do you need from me to help you get to here? Because I'm gonna need their permission.
Absolutely.
If I'm gonna lay into them, or if you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna need their permission to hold them accountable. I can tell people all the time, I met with a kid the other day, and I can call him a kid because he's young enough to be my son, right? A lot of them are now, right?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm only 100, right? I sat with him and I said, let me ask you a question. Who holds you accountable? Because it was obvious he didn't have anybody in his life that, and my pastor, my former pastor, who's my ghostwriter on my books, right?
Yeah.
See, if I,
You're good.
I know, I got to be part Italian, because if I didn't talk with my hands, I'd be tongue-tied, right? If I sat on my hands. So I'm talking to so I get this call from this person, young man, and he says, hey, by the way, just so you know, your ghostwriter, former pastor, sent me. Okay, so I go sit with him, and we sit and we have coffee, and I'm asking him a ton of questions, right? And I'm pulling stuff, and so all of a sudden I'm asking him, I was like, okay, let me ask you a question. Who holds you accountable? And he said, he just thought about it because he works for his dad. He works for his family. And he's in this family-owned business, and he wants to get out of it. Okay, so who holds you accountable? Well, nobody. Okay, and you're married, and you got a baby, and you got a baby on the way, right? And you're living with your mother-in-law. Okay, and these are all sources of frustration for him.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Who holds you accountable, right? And by the time we were done, it needed to be his wife. I said, okay, so here's your assignment. Go home today and have a conversation with your wife. As uncomfortable as it may be, have a conversation with your wife about holding you accountable.
Wow.
Okay? And share with her what your standard is. Because he's telling me what he wants. You with me?
Yep.
He wants to move out of mother-in-law's house. He wants to own his own house. He wants to have his own business. He wants to do all these things. But who's going to hold him accountable to do those things, right? And so I get into this really uncomfortable conversation with him about accountability, and specifically about his wife and the relationship that he has with his wife. And he literally says to me, you know, if I ask... We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.